The Sumerian tablets don't describe gods. They describe a system who holds knowledge, who controls its distribution, and what happens to the civilization underneath when that changes. I'm not going to tell you that's a coincidence with what's visible in 2025 and 2026. I'm just going to show you what the tablets actually say and let you decide whether they were recording history or leaving a warning. The tablets themselves are the place to start, not what people claim they mean, but what they actually say. The me are among the oldest concepts in the Sumerian written record. The word doesn't translate cleanly, which is part of why it gets overlooked, but the tablets are specific about what the me contained. Kingship, priesthood, descent into the underworld, the scribal arts, weaponry, law, music, the craft of the smith. Every function that made a civilization run. Not described abstractly, encoded, pressed into clay as discrete, transferable objects, held by a priestly class inside the temple complex at Eridu. That's the detail that stops me. The Sumerians didn't just practice these functions. They apparently felt the need to encode civilization itself into portable objects, and then decide who held them. That's not a religious act. That's an access control system. And the tablets are clear that the me were not distributed equally. They were held, managed, moved when threatened. Which brings us to the Eridu Genesis, the flood narrative whose written form predates the more familiar biblical version, with the oral tradition likely far older still. Most people remember the broad shape, a flood, a survivor, a boat. What gets lost in the retelling is a specific detail the tablets preserve. The gods debate whether to destroy humanity. The decision to warn is then made unilaterally by a single god, Enki, acting around the official decree, and it flows to one figure already positioned inside the system. The knowledge of what's coming doesn't flow outward. It flows to one figure already positioned inside the system. The tablets don't describe a natural disaster. They describe an information asymmetry, and they describe it without apparent horror, as if this is simply how things work. The third source is the Kesh Temple hymn, one of the oldest literary compositions in the record. The language around the temple is striking, a place of words that cannot be changed, a repository that is described as outlasting the civilization around it. The institution, in other words, is designed to survive the collapse of everything the institution is supposedly serving. The Sumerians built that logic into the structure. They named it. They hymned it. Now, I want to be honest about something, because this is exactly where the fringe reading enters the room. There's an interpretation, associated most prominently with Zechariah Sitchin, that the Anunnaki described in these tablets were extraterrestrial beings who engineered humanity and embedded their knowledge in the me as a kind of cosmic inheritance. I'm not going to give that the same weight as the cuneiform itself. The texts don't require that reading. They require something more uncomfortable. Because what the tablets actually describe, when you set aside the mythology and read the structure, is a system. Knowledge held by the few, distributed to the many only when it serves institutional power, and withdrawn when the system comes under stress. The me aren't magic, they're leverage. The Eridu Genesis isn't a miracle story. It's a documented case of who gets warned and who doesn't. The Kesh Temple hymn isn't a prayer, it's a continuity plan. Does the idea that the tablets are describing a system rather than a story change how you read them? Drop your answer below, because I'm genuinely curious whether that reframe lands the same way for everyone. Here's what I keep coming back to. The Sumerians didn't hide this. They pressed it into clay and left it. The pattern is sitting in museum archives, translated, cataloged, and almost entirely absent from any conversation about what's happening right now in 2025 and 2026. Because here's where it stops being about 2500 BCE and starts being about your newsfeed. The me weren't distributed equally. They were held, managed, and moved when threatened. Does that sound more like ancient religion to you, or something still running today? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because what the tablets describe next makes that question a lot harder to dismiss. The three-part structure the tablets describe, knowledge concentration, resource hoarding, institutional self-preservation, is running right now. Let's run it against what's actually visible. Start with knowledge concentration. The me, remember, weren't a philosophy. They were discrete, transferable objects encoding the functions of civilization, held by a class inside the temple. The tablets are specific that they moved when the system felt threatened. That's the part worth holding on to as you read this next detail. China's digital yuan, which has featured programmable payments since its launch, expanded its capabilities in 2025. That sounds like a technical upgrade. Here's what programmable means in practice. The issuing authority, not the holder, sets the conditions under which the currency can be spent. It can be restricted by category, by geography, by time window. 134 countries are now exploring CBDCs, and China's ECNY crossed 16 trillion yuan in cumulative transactions. I'm not saying that's sinister by design. I'm saying the Sumerians would have recognized the architecture immediately. Knowledge of the transaction and permission to complete it sitting inside the temple, not with you. That's the first arm of the pattern. The second is what the Eridu Genesis actually preserves. The flood wasn't a surprise to everyone. The decision about who received the warning was made inside the institutional structure, and it moved along existing lines of access. The modern equivalent isn't a conspiracy, it's a revealed preference, and revealed preferences are the most honest data we have. In 2026, ultra-high net worth individuals are investing in sophisticated underground compounds, combining luxury real estate, advanced security systems, and self-sustaining infrastructure. The stated drivers include geopolitical instability, cyber warfare, climate disruption, and supply chain vulnerability. Fine, those are real pressures. But here's the question the tablets train me to ask. If these risks are real enough to warrant private preparation at that scale, why isn't the information driving that preparation flowing outward? The Eridu Genesis doesn't describe a malicious flood. It describes a structural gap between who knows and who doesn't. The behavior we're watching in 2026 fits that description without requiring any conspiracy at all. It just requires that access follows existing lines of power, which it always has. The third arm is the Kesh Temple hymns logic, the institution designed to outlast the civilization it serves. The language the hymn uses is almost bureaucratic, words that cannot be changed, a repository that persists. That's not devotion, that's continuity engineering. And it maps cleanly onto something that doesn't get discussed much in the coverage of international institutional restructuring happening right now. The way treaty frameworks and intergovernmental bodies encode their own continuity into their founding documents, specifically so that political turbulence at the national level cannot dissolve them. The institution survives the collapse of the political will that created it. The Sumerians built that logic and then sang about it. We build it and call it governance architecture. Here's where I want to be precise about what I'm claiming, because this is the point where the argument either holds or it doesn't. I'm not saying the people making these decisions have read the tablets. I'm saying the tablets describe people making these decisions. That's a different and harder claim to dismiss, because it means the pattern isn't a warning about a specific group. It's a description of what institutional power does under stress, reliably, across at least 4,000 years of recorded behavior. Go back to the opening tablet language. The me held at Eridu, kingship, priesthood, law, the scribal arts, every function that made a civilization run, encoded and managed. Now read that again knowing that programmable currency permissions, private continuity infrastructure, and self-preserving institutional frameworks are all running simultaneously in 2026. The tablets weren't prophecy, they were documentation. And the civilizations that built a formal response to this pattern, that named it, institutionalized the recognition of it, acknowledged that collapse was a structural possibility rather than someone else's problem, lasted longer than the ones that treated it as ancient history. I don't know what the people who pressed these tablets into clay thought they were leaving behind. But I noticed that they left it, and I notice who's not talking about it now. Subscribe if that pattern bothers you as much as it bothers me, and you would like to see more content like this.